In the year 1842, the Louisiana sun hung like molten copper above the plantation fields, turning every breath into heat and dust. Along the auction block of Baton Rouge, men shouted bids like prayers to a God that never answered. Women and children stood in chains, faces blank, souls silent. When the hammer struck its final blow that morning, a girl of 20 named Eliza May was sold for 12 cents, less than the price of a loaf of bread. She carried within her a secret, the unborn child of her former master, conceived in violence, carried in silence. The crowd dispersed, leaving behind only the scent of sweat and the sound of iron shackles. The man who bought her was named Thomas Caldwell, a plantation owner whose wealth had turned to ash after the death of his wife. He was tall, hollow-eyed, and spoke like someone whose voice had been borrowed from the dead. "She'll do," he said quietly to the trader. "Bring her to the carriage." Eliza was led forward, her wrists bound, her eyes unflinching. She had stopped crying months ago. The road to the Caldwell estate wound through swamps and Spanish moss, where cypress trees bent low like old men in mourning. By the time they reached the house, night had fallen. The mansion loomed like a mausoleum, paint peeled from its bones, windows dim with years of neglect. Inside, silence lived. The servants whispered that the master hadn't spoken more than a dozen words in months. His wife Margaret had died 2 years earlier in childbirth, taking their infant son with her. The house, they said, had never recovered. Eliza was given a small room behind the kitchen, no larger than a closet. That night, as she lay awake on her straw mattress, she heard it for the first time, the sound of a piano, faint and far, drifting through the hallways. The notes were uneven, trembling, like the hands of a ghost remembering how to play. She rose, heart pounding, and pressed her ear to the door. The melody came from upstairs. When she asked about it the next morning, the cook crossed herself. "Don't speak of it," the woman warned. "Ain't no one been near that piano since Miss Margaret passed." Days blurred together. Eliza worked in the fields by day and cleaned the manor by night. Thomas rarely spoke except to give orders, but his voice carried no cruelty, only weariness. Sometimes, when she passed him on the porch, she caught him staring out at the river, lips moving in silent conversation with someone not there. Once she thought she saw a woman's shadow behind him in the window, a pale figure with hair the color of moonlight. But when she blinked, it was gone. The nights grew longer. The piano returned, always after midnight, always the same mournful tune. One evening, unable to bear it, Eliza lit a candle and crept upstairs. The long corridor smelled of lilacs and dust. At the far end stood a heavy oak door, its handle cold to the touch. As she neared, the piano stopped. Then from behind the door, a whisper, soft as breath, "Don't forget me." Morning found her pale and trembling. Thomas noticed. "You heard her," he said quietly, not looking up from his coffee. Eliza froze. "Who, sir?" "My wife." His voice cracked like dry wood. "She was fond of music. Seems she still is." He rose, leaving the room without another word. That night, when the storm rolled in, she dreamed of water, dark, rising, swallowing everything. When she woke, her hands were on her belly as though protecting the child from a world it had not yet seen. The next weeks brought change. Thomas began to speak more, small things, questions about her health, about the baby. He sent her warmer clothes when the wind grew cold. Yet the air between them stayed heavy with something unnamed, like the hush before thunder. The servants whispered that the master was losing his mind. Eliza began to believe it herself. One afternoon, while cleaning the parlor, she uncovered a painting hidden beneath a sheet. It was Margaret Caldwell, young, beautiful, her eyes bright with life. Beneath the portrait, a single line, "Beloved wife and mother." Eliza felt a chill as the scent of lilac filled the room. Somewhere upstairs, the piano began to play. Thomas found her there, frozen before the portrait. "She loved that song," he said softly. Eliza turned. "She still plays it," she whispered. He met her gaze for the first time, and for a heartbeat, she saw something fragile behind the stone of his face. "I know," he said. "I hear her too." That night, lightning split the sky. The wind howled through the cane fields, bending them like grass in a flood. The piano's song rose louder, wild and uneven. Eliza clutched her belly, whispering prayers to a God who seemed to have forgotten her name. When morning came, the storm had passed, but the house felt different. The air carried a weight, a grief that clung to the walls. Thomas stood on the porch, staring toward the river. "She was with me last night," he said quietly. "In the dream." She asked me why I didn't save her. Eliza said nothing. She didn't need to. The guilt was a living thing between them. Days later, she found him in the music room, sitting before the piano, his hands hovering above the keys. "Do you believe in redemption?" he asked. "No, sir," she said after a pause. "I believe in surviving," he nodded. "Maybe that's the same thing." He pressed a key and a single note filled the air, then another and another until the melody took shape once more, trembling but alive. Outside, thunder rumbled again, as if the heavens themselves remembered. The days after the storm grew stranger. The plantation air hung thick with whispers, as though the wind carried secrets it refused to keep. The servants moved quietly, their eyes averted, for they too had begun to hear the sounds in the night. Footsteps on the stairs, doors sighing open, and that haunting melody that came from the music room long after the candles had burned down. Eliza, heavy with child, felt the baby move each time the piano played, as if the unborn soul recognized something in the music. Perhaps grief, perhaps warning. One night, unable to bear the silence, she walked again to the music room. The door was half open, and Thomas sat in darkness, a single candle lighting his hollow face. His hands hovered above the keys but did not touch them. "She's here," he said without looking up. "Do you see her?" Eliza's breath caught in her throat, for in the reflection of the window she did see something. A woman in white, her eyes dark and full of sorrow, standing just behind him. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Only the trembling of the piano as if unseen hands brushed the ivory. Eliza whispered, "She doesn't want you to play." Thomas turned, his voice breaking. "She wants me to remember." Then with trembling hands, he began to play the tune that had haunted the halls for months, the same song Margaret had played before she died. As he played, the candle flickered violently, and a wind swept through the room though every window was shut. The portrait of Margaret above the fireplace trembled on its nail, and the air filled with the scent of lilacs. Eliza stepped back, clutching her belly, as shadows stretched along the walls like reaching hands. Thomas's voice rose above the storm. "I didn't mean to let you go, Maggie. I tried, God help me, I tried." The piano's sound grew wilder, discordant as if the instrument itself screamed in grief. The ghostly figure stepped closer, her form flickering between light and darkness. "She forgives you?" Eliza whispered, though she wasn't sure the words came from her own mouth. Margaret's ghost turned toward her, eyes softening, gaze falling to Eliza's stomach. A faint smile touched her lips. "Protect the child," came the whisper. Barely a breath, then the figure faded like smoke in moonlight. The piano fell silent. Thomas's hands dropped, tears cutting paths through the dust on his cheeks. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Thomas rose, voice low and hoarse. "Eliza, leave this house. Take whatever you need and go before dawn. There's nothing here but ghosts now." She shook her head. "I've nowhere to go, sir." He looked at her then, truly looked, as though seeing not a slave but a woman, alive, breathing, carrying something innocent into a cruel world. "Then stay," he said finally. "But promise me the child will never know what kind of man owned you. Let him believe he was born free." His voice cracked on the last word. She nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. The storm outside began to fade, and through the shattered clouds came the first light of morning. Weeks later, the baby came. The labor was long, the screams muffled by thunder, but when the child cried for the first time, the house itself seemed to breathe again. Thomas held the newborn for a single moment, awe breaking through his grief. "He has her eyes," he whispered. "No," Eliza said gently. "He has mine." A small smile flickered on Thomas's face before he turned away. That night when Eliza awoke, she found the manor silent. Thomas was gone. They found him at dawn by the riverbank, his boots still in the mud, his hat caught in the reeds. Some said he drowned himself. Others whispered Margaret came to take him home. No one ever saw him again. Years passed. The Caldwell estate crumbled into ruin, overtaken by vines and silence. Eliza raised her son in a small cabin near the edge of the property. She told him stories, not of chains or sorrow, but of music, of love, of how even the haunted can find peace. On quiet nights when the wind moved through the trees, she sometimes heard the faint echo of a piano. Not sad this time, but calm, like a soul finally at rest. She would smile then, holding her child close, whispering, "Sleep now. The ghosts have gone. But the legend of the house never died. Travelers who passed through the old road swore they could hear faint music near the ruins, and sometimes a woman's voice humming softly to a baby that was never seen. The locals called it the Song of 12 Cents, a melody born from sorrow, forgiveness, and the price of a soul bought too cheap. And every now and then, when the moon was high and the air smelled faintly of lilacs, someone said they saw a shadow in the window, a man and a woman standing side by side, watching over something the world could never take away again. If you felt her pain, if you heard her music, like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below.